Hello, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the latest episode of Tapiyay. Today we are not in the studio. Today we're doing a bit different because we have a very special guest from Karachi. It is Iman Arbab. She is cricket writer, analyst. She is very passionate about the women's game. So we'll be talking about Pakistan's women cricket and women's cricket in general. So welcome on the show, Iman.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
So we'll start, Iman, with like the recently concluded Pakistan versus West Indies series. Like, how did it go wrong for Pakistan so much? Considering we thought that last year we had shown a lot of improvement from the women's side.
Yeah, I feel like there's a few things that went wrong. I don't want to take the responsibility away from the team because absolutely they didn't perform the way they should have. We typically start series with T20s and then we go into ODIs. Starting with ODIs where the gap between us and just even the midfield teams is really, really big just because of the number of ODIs our girls get to play, the number of domestic one days they get to play, the number of long format matches they get to play, period. When you don't have experience of batting like 100 balls yourself, or even batting a long innings, or even bowling a long innings, or fielding a long innings, when you get like 3 4 matches a year, will be mushkil se, because if you look at our domestic schedule before 2024, they were barely getting that opportunity to play one day cricket. Even the best of them, so like Nida Alia types, were barely getting the opportunity. तो वी ऑलवेज से कि ओ डोमेस्टिक और इंटरनेशनल में बहुत फर्क है, मगर द पॉइंट इज कि डोमेस्टिक में अगर कुछ है नहीं तो वो ट्रेन कैसे करेंगे डोमेस्टिक लेवल पे. So then obviously when they come to the one day game, at international level, they're just not gonna match up the likes of Haley Matthews or I mean, I wouldn't say, oh, West Indies is such a good domestic system and that's why they beat us. No, it's not that. But when you put up against generational talents like Haley, like Chamari, it doesn't really matter what kind of system they come from, unless you have the kind of generational talent to back that up. And Pakistan has a lot of excellent players. Our crop right now is probably like I would say the best that we ever had, even though we've lived in a time with Sana Mir and Bismah Maroof. But the average skill level that we have in the team is a lot higher now. Because the fundamentals aren't strong at this point, so we just struggle. And so one of my conspiracy theories is क्योंकि पहले ODIs हुए थे और फिर हम 3-0 हार गए, and then we came to the T20s, the team was already really, really struggling. And I don't care what people say, psychological effects are very real in cricket. And I fully 100% believe that New Zealand हम जब गए थे, we won 2-1 the T20 series, then going into the ODIs, that's why we put a fight up in every single game. Yes, it's also because the New Zealand conditions suited us a lot more. It's also like South Africa, maybe when we beat them 3-0, then we were able to put up a fight in the ODIs because the conditions suited us a lot more. So it's conditions, it's like a bit of psychological effect, it's underperformance 100%. But honestly, I was really, really like confident about the series. I was like, no matter the conditions, Haley Matthews was, by the way, not in the greatest of forms before the series. So I was under the impression that she wasn't going to do anything. She ended up having like a completely ridiculous tour. It doesn't happen to people, okay? Everything that could have gone wrong for Pakistan, almost all of it went wrong. I mean, there were a few highlights. Sidra Amin was brilliant as always. Our over reliance on her in ODIs is only going to hurt her career, which is really, really upsetting and really depressing. Magar, her T20 emergence has been brilliant. I think Tuba's return was incredible as well. Fatma, even though she was struggling a bit with her foot in the middle there, her kind of bowling this series or tour, maybe it flew under the radar, but I thought she was brilliant. Even her new plan about bowling fuller and bowling Yorkers, she was struggling in the beginning, but by the end of the series, that's the benefit of playing a lot of cricket. We played 8 matches versus them. So there was a big difference between the Fatma that started that series and the Fatma that ended that series. So yeah, I mean that's my thoughts. Sorry, I just ended up ranting and dumping a
No,
lot
no,
of
no,
thoughts on you. Yeah.
no, it's good. Like that's what we want to hear from you. And so like if we divide that into like there are basically two issues. One is a structure or a fundamental issue that our women players don't get to play enough games throughout the year, whether it be international or whether it be domestic. So like, don't you think like now the game has been around so much in Pakistan that there needs to be like a proper domestic system where At least there might be like not a 4-day trophy, but a 3-day tournament or even a 2-day tournament would work.
Yeah.
Like that sort
Yeah.
of thing we need, and so that we can have a sort of a little experience of playing the longer format, which might be like something like 60 over the side or 70 over the side or something of the sort. What do you feel about
Yeah.
that?
No, I 100% agree. I think one of the things is when people are like, oh, like women's cricketers are just not gonna play test cricket. That's not why you play first class cricket, okay, or like list A cricket or anything like that. You don't play it because oh, एक दिन हमने one day international खेलना है या एक दिन हमने test match खेलना है. Fine, Pakistan may never play a test match. That's depressing, but whatever. Okay, they might never. But that doesn't mean you don't give them 3-day cricket. In my ideal world, our women's domestic system would be like 3 or 4 tiered. So you would have senior level under 23, the way Sri Lanka now does, the way India's had for a long time. You would have under 19, you would have under 16. Maybe one day even under 13. But I think under 13 is a bit of a stretch right now. And then within that, then you would have obviously T20, which we have to play one day, and one day wouldn't be reduced to 45 overs like it was last year, which was absolutely ridiculous. Why at the senior level are your girls not playing 50 over cricket? I just baffles me. And then you would have 3-day cricket. And obviously when you go lower down, like under 19, under 16, where you would have 2-day, I mean under 16, I don't think 2-day, but under 16 level where you probably have 35 over cricket and then 20 over cricket, right? Kind of like easing them into it. मगर अगर ये infrastructure है ही नहीं, if you're never building up to something, if 12-year-old Samya is playing the same cricket that someone, I don't know, Aisha Zafar or Sidra Amin or Sidra Nawaz are playing in the one day cup, it's the system is just not doing its job. I think this year was a step up in terms of, well, we got 2 6 team tournaments. But it's not an infrastructure. Anyone who calls this a domestic system is honestly fooling themselves. I think I remember a few years ago, I think 2021 or 22 May, the PCB released their domestic calendar. And they called it like God, a blockbuster calendar, and it wasn't a calendar. There was there was no calendar because they mentioned 2 tournaments in that. It was just a graphic with 2 tournaments, and they were like 2 3 team tournaments. So it was and they lasted like a week each. So a calendar is like, yeah, we're gonna block out 3 4 months of the year and we're gonna play this and this cricket. And if the senior team is touring, let them tour. If the under 19 team is touring, let them tour. But whoever's available is gonna play this, blah blah blah. Um, but yeah, and it's kind of like, yeah, it's just really haphazard the way things are done. The fact that first class cricket is not even on their radar is is baffling to me, because if you watch us play one day cricket and you understand the struggles we have, you realize that there's no shortage of intent or like fundamental talent or skill level or something like that. It's literally about experience and exposure. It's literally about them not being able to bat longer. I mean, why is Maniba, who does so well at domestic level and has virtually no weaknesses, just not able to bat long in ODIs? I think she averages something below 15 in the last year and a half, which is just not even underperformance. It's like there's something fundamentally wrong with the system and not her. It's at that point. But yeah, yeah. Sorry. Again, a
And,
lot of strong feelings about this.
and it's also like that we probably like for the women's wing of the board, it's sort of pretty much a one man show, or even that person does not even have the power sort of to make the decisions. For instance, like if you look at the PCB in general, so like there are like director, domestic cricket, and all of that. At least whether even it's just for the namesake that those positions exist, yeah, वो profiles exist करती हैं. We don't exactly know कि yes उनका decision making में भी role होगा, but women's cricket में तो we don't even feel we don't even see that they have enough of say in how the cricket should be governed or managed. या कितने tournaments होने चाहिए, कितने players होने चाहिए, and all of that. So it also feels like they need to be more empowered, sort of independently. Like, yes, they remain a sidearm of the PCB, but in terms of their internal working उनको ज़्यादा independent करने की ज़रूरत है ताकि जो भी चेयरपर्सन आए वो आके उसको इम्प्रूवमेंट ला सके डोमेस्टिक स्ट्रक्चर हो वेदर या वेदर इट इज द इंटरनेशनल टीम्स या जो भी अफेयर्स हैं.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think it was released, there was a article released by Cricinfo last year, about Tanya Malik talking about who runs the women's wing, talking about why we don't have a women's PSL yet. And long story short, what she said was, well, we had the plans, our hands are tied. Things keep changing in the PCB. It makes you feel bad for them because obviously, you're like, well, it's not their fault that, Pakistan's governments keep changing or the
Yeah,
PCB chairman keep changing. That being said, I think when you've been running a team or a system for 20 years, and if you've been part of that system for like 5 years, some of them have been there for 10 years, maybe more. I don't even know at this point, to be honest, because it's been so long for some of them who run women's cricket. And you're struggling to get, 6 team tournaments out. I mean, the first time you did it was 20 years after the women's team got taken over by the PCB. Not only is that a failure of the system, but it's also the failure of people who work in it. I feel like I don't want to say they're escaping accountability, but I think that you're absolutely spot on because until the PCB gives them that empowerment, then we can't even hold them accountable.
yeah.
Because फिर वो कहेंगे कि यार हम लोग कर ही नहीं सकते हम क्या
हमारे पास पावर
and
ही नहीं है.
yeah, exactly. And that's such a frustrating answer as a fan or as like a journalist or someone who consumes this sport because there's so many fixable things. Last year जब उन्होंने 4 team tournament announce किया था, last year by the way the domestic tournament was really funny. They had phase one in which they had T20 games. But I think they only had like 6 games and there was no final. And then they had the ODI phase, the 1 day phase right after that. And उसमें half of like some of the players went to the Emerging Asia Cup, so they missed it. So those players didn't even get the 1 day tournament. And this happened in the space of like 2 weeks. Both the tournaments happened. And I remember there was this video released with our coach at the time. And he was like very proudly talking about, I'm so proud of us for being able to field 4 teams or 3 teams or something. And I was thinking, like, really? Like, acha, mujhe shayad nahi pata hoga about our pool. Like, that's a big deal. Like, we can field 3 or 4 teams. That's a big deal. And then a few months later, they released a list of domestic contracts. And we have offered, I think, total domestic or international milakar, we have 105 contracts right now from my count. It might be different than the PCB's count. I don't know anything except for what they put in their press release. But 105 girls who you think are good enough to play cricket in Pakistan, and you are congratulating them on fielding four, like 13 squad teams. And I was like, that math doesn't add up here. And then obviously a few months later, they had that 6 team tournament. So it's clearly like, yes, I feel like there's a lot of outside noise with the women's wing that, probably is, hindering their progress. But it's also like if you're going to celebrate the bare minimum 1 year and then a few months later just show that, oh, you can easily do something much better than that. What is that going to look like to journalists and fans that follow the sport? It's obviously like, oh, there's so many things you can fix. Keep fixing them, please. But yeah, that's just something that I
and
struggle
I,
with. I
and
want to be nice to them, but yeah.
yeah, and I also feel like more than the outside noise there are like some like खुद से preconceived notions that if we do something about it, तो पता नहीं what sort of reaction we might get. But they keep forgetting like Pakistan's a very changed country. Like over the years, like there are a lot more interest, a lot more viewing of the women's game,
Yeah.
and if the girls are given the opportunity to play the domestic game, a lot of them would be very much willing to do, but there are not no pathways, no opportunities for them to play those games.
Yeah.
So like another thing that which I because about we were talking about the domestic and all of that, and I think so like the scheduling of it is also very funny in the sense that they schedule it right across with the main series. Like the tournament started when the West Indies team was here, so like it's not like your women's team is playing cricket all year round like the men's team that it's so busy that you can't fit in a schedule where the national players can also play in a tournament. But wo, I don't think so. They're thinking or they sort of they just feel के अगर हम टूर्नामेंट करवा दे तो वो बड़ी अचीवमेंट है बट they don't feel like it is basically a way of improving your cricket, improving your player skills and all of that. And I do feel like it, sometimes they do it in the sense that wo, they, feel, they just do the bare minimum and they're happy with it. Most things in Pakistan like कि हमने bare minimum कर दिया तो it's good और अब इनको खुश होना चाहिए.
Yeah.
Khair, moving on, another like segue which you talked about was Haley Matthews' performance and all of that. How phenomenal series she had. But one thing which I remember, like, if correct me if I'm wrong, that a few years ago she wasn't this good a batter that she has become now. And you also mentioned that Tanya Malik said last year that they had the women's PSL ready, and it was sort of uh, everything was in the works, but because PCB chairmen or management kept changing, so they could not go ahead, get the go ahead and go ahead with it. So like players like Haley Matthews have gotten to play 2 seasons of the Women's Premier League. So you feel like उनकी जो गेम है उसमें इम्प्रूवमेंट की जो एक बड़ी वजह वो वुमेन्स प्रीमियर लीग है और लाइक how important could be the women's PSL for improving our game first and then even improving our the structure or the domestic setup and all of that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hesitant to credit the Women's Premier League for Haley Matthews because she's Haley Matthews. I mean, she's been like, I think in the GOAT conversations, she was like 18 years old or something. But no, 100%, I feel like it does make a difference. Our players have spoken about it so many times as well. Just the ability to speak to other players and to learn from them. I mean, we have Fatma the captain because of exposure with international level players, and that kind of exposure, yes, you do get it on tours, yes, you do get it by traveling to these places to play, bilateral series or like World Cups or whatever, but you get it from playing in the same team more than anything. And so if you look at India only, if we are to have a women's PSL, we would have ideally the same kind of benefits that India is having from the Women's Premier League. And the benefits they're having are insane. Their domestic level batters, their number three batter this series, I call her Hema, I think. I can't remember her full name right now. I feel awful, but their number three batter. I really, really, she flew under the radar for me before. It was after the Women's Premier League where I think her team kept batting her at three, and then she kind of just emerged in this Bangladesh series, which is really tough to bat in, by the way. And she's just hitting sixes after sixes, and she's really going after the bowlers. And look, that doesn't happen in a vacuum. That happens because you had an opportunity to play high level T20 cricket consecutively by a team that was backing you. And when you've got like a 4 team league or a 6 team league or even a 3 team league, you've got like 60 players. Yeah, I mean 20 की squad होती है. 60 players that are definitely going to get that exposure. That's an insane amount of players that are going to play high level cricket outside of a World Cup. Okay, and then you see it with Shriyanka Patil. You see it with who just debuted the other day. I'm sorry, it's too early in the morning for me to remember all these names. But my point is that it's really changed the face of what was already a strong Indian team. And India comes from like the Indian team comes from a really good domestic system, right? Okay, I mean they have interzonal level pay games, they have city level pay games, they have like games that are organized by the BCCI and stuff. So they have so many different options, but still the Women's Premier League is managing to help them. So for Pakistan, a country that has very little in terms of a domestic system, we could do so much more. Like it's not even a question, honestly. Um, and I feel like this was something that we said many years ago. And at the time, I thought, okay, oh, no, we need domestic, but we've reached a point where we need both. I mean, Pakistan as a team is not going to survive. We're not going to win anytime soon. We're not going to make the semifinals anytime soon. We're not going to make it out of the ODI World Cup qualifiers anytime soon, even, I would argue. And it's not because OT20 cricket is influencing ODI cricket or anything like that. It is because if you don't have a domestic system and then you're not playing high level Women's Premier League, you're just falling behind. I feel like women's team exclusion from the Women's Premier League is more hurtful to me than the IPL and the men and whatever's been going on. Even though the IPL exclusion has been going on for a lot longer. And you would argue that our men's players would have much bigger chance of making it to the IPL in bigger numbers than the women's team. But the fact that our best, like Fatma or Nida or even Aisha Naseem when she was playing, and they don't have a chance to even sign up, which every other team, associate nation and other smaller nations, midfield teams, everyone has a chance to do. Um, yeah, it's a psychological blow, but it's also like experience and exposure. But yeah, again,
and
different long
and
answer.
you-
Yeah.
and even the financial side of it's
Oh,
pretty right
100%.
because
100%.
the more financially strong the players are, the more chances of them being very independent with their choices and all of that,
Yeah.
considering the sort of society that exists here. And there is a continuous pressure that sort of we tend to forget at times that uh, the pressure through which the players come, and despite all of that, playing and performing, it's a big deal
Yeah.
because there is not what you would say a proper support system that probably exists elsewhere. Another thing point about that falling behind thing is that there are new countries coming on the block, and what they're not like more talented than us or anything, but what they have got is like they can put a right system in place to get the right kind of results. And if we don't put in that system, the others will put in, and we'll keep falling behind. Because now the women's game, I see it's quite a lot expanding. A lot of new countries are playing it. The qualifiers and the championship has continuously more teams. Like we've just seen Scotland and Ireland and Zimbabwe and all of these very exciting teams. I'm forgetting the side that defeated Zimbabwe. I don't remember its exact name. It was pretty tough, but a lot of these sides are they're improving day by day. And if we don't improve our structure and domestic, so we might fall behind so bad that these teams might take us over. So it's high
Yeah.
time that PCB actually does something about fixing the structure and the domestic cricket of the women's.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I feel like this attitude that I've heard from a few people, which is that, oh, like one day it's gonna be like such a big deal that we will just have to do it. And I'm like, why not now? You should have gotten ahead of the curve, like 10 years ago, to be honest. But even a few years ago, when your chairman said something about a women's league and it just didn't happen, what are you waiting for? What could be worse than the fact that Pakistan will likely be playing the qualifiers for the ODI World Cup again? Like, what could possibly, how much more do you want our girls to struggle? Because at this point, it's not their fault anymore. Because they do well in at home and they don't get it. They do well away, they don't get it. They struggle at home, they don't get it. They struggle away, they don't get it. The last like year has been ups and downs. I mean, people remember us winning, but I mean you also might remember us really struggling in Bangladesh and at the Asian Games. We went as ex-gold medalists the last time we were at the Asian Games, and we didn't even win a medal. We didn't even make gold. And listen, when you're up against teams like Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, who you're very competitive with, we are not lesser teams than these. I mean, I would argue that we're also better teams than these. It is perhaps that the conditions just favored them more because there are more home conditions for them, just because the way the pitches were playing out. But that shouldn't be an excuse. It shouldn't be. Teams that are actually good at T20 and ODI cricket nullify the pitch. That's why when people were saying that, oh, like Bangladesh, the World Cup this time, Pakistan's going to be competitive, and Australia and New Zealand type teams are going to struggle, or England even. And I was like, no, because not only are we not that good in slower conditions, but teams like Australia and England don't let pitches define how they're going to play. Um, Also, they're rich enough to schedule series beforehand in similar conditions. So, they're not like us where we basically like we don't plan for anything ever. I mean, Bangladesh and India having a series specifically in the venue that India is going to play the World Cup because India knows they need to prepare for the World Cup. England, when they toured last year to India, they played their A team there as well, knowing that the ODI World Cup is going to be in India and their A team could use that experience. Also, Indian conditions that they got in the series are very similar to, I think, what you will see in Bangladesh. So, even their main team has experienced Bangladeshi conditions in a sense. And then, Australia again has experienced Indian conditions very similar. All the top teams know how to prepare for World Cups and how to put us out of the game. So I don't know what they're waiting for. I don't know why they're wanting us. I don't know what possibly they could want to happen for them to be like, okay, now it's time to do something. So either people are like, oh, women's cricket is just not fixable, or they're like, we'll get to it eventually. And I feel like it is fixable and do it now. Like we can give you a list, just start. Seriously. But yeah.
And it's also like we announced the women's PSL before even the women's Premier League was announced or getting started.
Full
And I
season
was,
of
yeah, and I was really excited about that. We are going to be the women's Premier League or the IPL in that we will be launching the women's league first, and we will be like the front runners. But uh, that's now quite a bit like those seasons don't get to. We hope that as early as like next season, probably we can have the women's PSL up and running because that's very important for our women's cricket. So now, like moving on, like you talked about the conditions and the strategies and planning. So it's also like the initial thought that you said was like about the West Indies series was like there is a structural problem, but then there is the problem which are with strategy, with how the team uses its resources, and how does it plan for certain players or certain series. So like that's one area where I feel like that even if you are like yes, those are the long term things which need to be fixed. The structure needs to be fixed. More players need to be given the opportunity. But there's some short term fixes that might be needed to sort of improve the current performance with the players and the group of players you have because they're very talented players, all of them, and all they need is just some right kind of direction or planning or strategy to sort of improve their game upon. So what do you feel like, where do we lack in that strategy, where we can improve in that strategy, in that game awareness, in those tactics that can sort of uh, improve our performances?
I've honestly always maintained that doing selection for the Pakistan women's cricket team and then strategizing with the team that you selected is not nearly as difficult as people might think it is. Just because हमारे जो options हैं, because of the way they developed the system, because the way they've constructed our talent pool, are quite limited, right? So that's why you see the same players every other series, no matter what the conditions are. So it's quite easy to select a team. And then it's quite easy to play that team as well. Even our options, Amaraba's new ball options, typically Diana, Sadia, you've got Fatma. I think Nida's quite fun as a captain in the sense that she is not the captain that she will want to stick to the script. When she realizes Sadia is bowling well, or Fatma is doing well, or two players are building up pressure really well, she will keep them on. She will bowl them out entirely. I think one of the things that actually shocks me is when Nida fails to do that. In the last T20, she didn't bowl Sadia out early, and she brought Fatma back in quite early, which was nice. But Fatma didn't end up bowling out. They ended up chasing it quite comfortably. But I thought that Nida might have just bowled them out quite early, which would have been really fun. But you also have to balance that risk and reward. Okay, like those were her two best bowlers. She wanted to save them for when she needed them. She was hoping someone else would get the breakthrough. But the point I'm getting at is we're actually quite okay. I never see something really, really big. But I feel like that's cricket in the sense that when I was first getting into it, I would always be like, if I was Babar Azam, I would have done this instead. But maturing has made me realize that there's always so many options to do. It's very rare that the option that the captain has chosen or the strategist in the team or the whoever's in the team has chosen is the wrong one. That being said, I thought that fundamentally our bowling plans were god awful. Um, I think the order was fine, but the lengths they were bowling, especially early on in the series, were just wrong. The lines as well. I felt at one point the commentator in the T20 series said Nida has been spot on this series, and I was thinking, what? For the first time in my life, I saw Nida struggling to control her line in a pitch that was conducive to her bowling. And I'm not sure, maybe because she got wickets, he thought that she was doing really well this season. I'm not sure what happened there, but I was like, this is probably the worst I've seen her bowl in a while. Um, and even Nashra, who had a really good domestic season, is coming in, and Nasha is someone you really rely on being completely accurate. That's her entire thing. She bowls in the same place with excellent control again and again and again, and she deceives the batter because her ball dips so beautifully. And she was just struggling. She was possibly one of our worst bowlers in a lot of matches, which doesn't happen in Asha Sandhu. And so it's like, oh, this player's out of form, that player's out of form. But at a certain point, when everyone's making the same mistakes, you're like, okay, clearly it's something wrong with the plan that they've been given. I think, God, I don't remember this right now, but something that they'd done early on in the ODI series, they bowled a certain way, and then the West Indies came and bowled a completely different way. Now, I can't for the life of me remember if we were bowling full and they were bowling short, but the point is that the West Indies came with a better plan than us. And it was in the second ODI that, or the third ODI, that we realized, oh, this is what they were doing and we should copy them. That shouldn't be happening. It shouldn't be the visiting team telling you how to bowl in your conditions, you know? And I just I just think that when we've got a team that is playing at home and they're struggling to bowl or bat at home, you have to look back at your system and then your management and say, what were you doing to prepare them? Like, how could this possibly be happening? I think Alia Riaz, who's been in excellent form for like a year, and she just won player of the tournament. People are like, oh, she's out of form. It is not possible for someone to be in such good form for consecutive series. She did well versus South Africa. She did terribly at the Asian Games and in Bangladesh. She did excellent versus New Zealand. She did mind-blowingly amazing in the domestic tournament. How does that happen? How do you go from the best to the worst to the best to the worst to the best to the worst? And then she was again the worst right now. It doesn't. So when you pay attention, you realize it's because of the conditions she was playing in. It's because the opponent was bowling spin at her in certain places, and in other places she was being fed pace. Now, if someone like Alia, who has been in the system for so long, who's played cricket for so long, is not able to bat in these conditions, is not able to like tackle her weaknesses. I mean, chalo, even Babar Azam has weaknesses. Everyone has weaknesses. Okay. So even Alia Riaz naturally has weaknesses. But that doesn't mean they're going to be completely handicapped to the point that they get dropped from the team. I was actually 100% on board with her being dropped because I thought that it was just painful. I think she needed a break away from the side. But the fact that it got to that, it really says a lot about the preparation building up to the series. And if we cannot prepare, for a home series, the World Cup or ODI World Cup, the T20 World Cup, like, prepare kar lenge.
Yeah.
So,
And it's
so
also a
that's my.
case of, yeah, and it's also like the tactics, for instance, like if a certain player is struggling against spin, so you don't
Oh yeah,
necessarily send them when the spin's on, you probably keep them in the shed or sort of wait when there will
yeah,
be a favorable matchup so that we can utilize them that way. And
yeah,
it's also got to do with like the team management we have in place, like Salim Jaffer, a former cricketer, no disrespect to him, but like he does not know about anything about the modern game, how it's being played, and even how I would say how the women's game even actually works. Because there's a huge difference between how the men's game and the women's game is played, and you cannot sort of uh, make the same sort of strategies that you do in the men's game for the women's side because they might actually backfire here because there's a completely different uh, ploy at play.
yeah. I
And
I would hope that because Salim Jaffer, Saab, and the rest of them have been with the team for so long, some of them have returned as well, very recently, that they know about women's cricket. Magar, I will say, I think while we saw a positive shift in our team's intent, and um that doesn't happen in a vacuum. Clearly something somewhere, someone is saying something and it's working, with regards to our batting or even with regards to our bowling, which barring this series has always been our strong suit, right?
yes,
And even in this series, glimpses of
yeah,
our incredible bowling. Our batting failed us a lot, um in the T20 series especially. But that being said, I think the chairman's decision to implement new coaches is really, really good, really refreshing.
yeah.
Uh, yeah, but I'm pretty happy about that.
Yeah, and yes, probably like people like Salim Jaffer more of needed at the domestic level where they can actually work on the techniques and the technical side of things at which they can help improve the fast bowlers or spinners or whatever
Yeah.
the journal game can improve. But for the national side where you don't actually work on strategy or where you don't actually work on the technique or anything, you work more of need to work on strategy and planning and all of those things. Probably there might be someone much better who can be hired so that they can strategize a lot better than it is happening currently. And like yes, the point about bowling, like I don't have any concerns about the bowling. Like yes, they can have their off days, but generally the bowling always comes good. But the problem that I actually have is like with a batting, like the resource utilization, especially like in the T20s, like we have a lot of options and we sometimes sort of downplay our options, our own selves, like probably like people like Natalia Pave is a pretty good batter. We saw that in a domestic T20 tournament as well, but we sort of don't utilize them right. Like even Tuba Hassan or Fatma Sana, like these are proper. I feel like they are very decent batters and they can be utilized in the middle order or even because T20 cricket you have got just 20 overs and after like 7 to 8 overs you can sort of your batting lineup should not be rigid or it should be fluid.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think with Fatma Sana, you could argue कि oh, domestic cricket में, she was the kind of captain this season that would send everyone before her, would bowl everyone before her, which I love about her. It's one of the many things I love about Fatma. Magar, when you see how Natalia fared, because her team really relied on her. They were, the batting lineup for Pindi, it was strong at the top, but in terms of the middle order, Alia and Natalia were heavily carrying. And then in for Tuba's team, Quetta, right?
Yes, Quetta. Yeah, Quetta.
They really, really relied on her. Like, yeah, there were a few top order batters that were doing well. But when you put your national level players into that situation and you watch them thrive, that should be an indication for you to realize. So I was like, oh, maybe they don't want to use Fatma like because they don't realize she can, or they're like, oh, she hasn't had enough domestic experience to do that yet. But Natalia and Tuba, who just did, are being heavily underutilized. And if you look at the numbers from this series, Natalia terrible dismissals. I was genuinely really frustrated with her. And Tuba was, I mean, sent out in impossible situations. When Tuba should have been used as a floater, when you've got a 5-match series that has no stakes involved except just cricket, I mean, use it to experiment. And they didn't. They didn't. They kept persisting. They kept trying to bat top order batters at 4. I don't understand the point of that. Your weakness is your middle order. Sidra is carrying your top order right now. I understand concerns at 3, मगर आपने मुनीबा को डाल दिया. हो गई बात. I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me that Tuba, who could maybe potentially be a number 4 for us, or Natalia, who's always around the team but never somehow playing in the team, similar to other players who are carried around as well. It's just baffling to me. You're spot on. I feel like we should be building up our batting by trying new things. अब हम लोग इंग्लैंड जाके तो नहीं try कर सकते. I mean करेंगे. I hope. I mean I'll still hope for it. मगर 5-match series versus West Indies versus 3 matches versus England. I mean obviously you should have tried in the West Indies series. Why didn't you? But yeah.
And like talking about like the experimentation with our batting and all and journal about our batting. So like during the West Indies series, we got to hear that one of our batting's mainstays, Bismah Maroof, announced his retirement from international cricket. And so like let me put in a little story here just for you that the school that Bismah Maroof used to study in, my eldest sister used to study in the same school, and probably Bismah used to be like I guess 1 or 2 grades older than my sister, and one of the first times that I actually got to hear about women's cricket was because at that time, so like in my school and in her school, there used to be school cricket championships at that time, and in which women cricketers in which girls you also used to play alongside boys, and it was one of those instances where I got to know about through my sister that there is a girl called Bismah Maroof that got selected for the Pakistan team. Probably, I don't remember the exact age, but age 15 or 16. And that was probably the first time I got to know about, oh, we have got a women's team. And women's can also play cricket. So like that was the first introduction to Bismah Maroof that from school, like she was so good at that age that they straight away picked her and fast tracked her to the women's side, into the national side, and then we have seen how her career has panned out. So your thoughts? I know it's a very tricky or an emotional topic for you, but like your thoughts on Bismarck's career, his retirement, and where do we, how do we move on from it, and all of that.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think the hardest thing about this retirement is I didn't see it coming. I think with a lot of things in women's cricket, there's very few things that ever shock me. You know, even Javeria's retirement, although that was a bit of a surprise, I expected she would play domestic cricket for a long while. She had such a good national T20 tournament. Um, and yeah, but with Bisma, I was mid-series. I was on holiday. I was literally like I was exploring these ancient Greece ruins in the country that I was visiting, and I was having like the time of my life because my friends and I were big fans of history. And I remember we went to the gift shop and I opened my phone and I wasn't using Twitter a lot those days. And a friend of mine had tagged me and said, Iman's gonna lose it when she sees this, and he tagged me. And that's how I found out. And I just sat down in the gift shop. Like I just grabbed a chair and I sat down. Um, and it's hard to kind of explain what Bismah Maroof means as a fan and as someone who follows the game so closely. When we talk about Pakistan's positives, as a team, it's the positives are usually because Bismarck का कोई influence होता है, whether it's our middle overs batting or whether it's our acceleration in the death as well, which I'm pretty proud of because we struggle a lot in the power play historically. We do okay in the middle, actually quite good in the middle, and then we kind of explore the death. And people are always like, "Oh, Alia की वजह से, Nida की वजह से." But it's not just because of that. Bismarck's strike rate jump from the middle to the death is very impressive. Plus just her kind of stature in the team and what she got to us as a captain. When I started watching cricket for me, the team was just Bismah Maroof, Nidadar, Bismah this, Bismah that. And I think that happens when you have like a legendary player in your team. It becomes about that player all the time. And I liken Bismah a lot to Misbah, but and I don't like comparisons from men's and women's cricket because I don't like comparing the two just generally. But it's really important for someone to understand that the kind of command that Bisma had over her team and the kind of carry jobs she put in, the kind of difficult situations that she dragged us out of, or even if she wasn't able to drag us out of, she kind of helped us save face a little. It's you can't even count the number of situations when we would lose a wicket and Bisma would or two if she was batting at four, she would walk out. I wouldn't be worried. I would be worried after she got out. I'd be like, okay, now it's the time to freak out a little bit. Because as long as someone like Bisma or Nida is on the crease, you're like, yeah, we got this. Like, it's fine. Even at her worst, and apparently the last few months were her worst. Um, I didn't realize that these would be her last few months, but anyways, they were. She was still winning us games. Like, the South Africa ODI that we won, it was with Sidra and Bisma. The Bangladesh one T20 that we won, it was because of Maniba, but Bisma was on the other end. The T20 the ODI that we tied versus New Zealand, the one that we won the super over of. It was because of Bisma, and she was the player of the match. And I'm really glad that she won that player of the match, and I'm really glad that that's the way things went. Honestly, I did not see this coming. I thought we would see it after the World Cup next year. So in my head, it was like, oh yeah, so like that's our number three. We could maybe train Gul for ODIs and then Maniba for T20s. And all of a sudden now we've got two World Cups coming up and we've got a big gaping hole in our team. So it's from a team perspective, it's obviously for me, it's really hard. But from a player perspective, from a personal perspective as well, it's like it's hard to it's hard to explain to people who've not never watched the sport or never watched our team what she means. It's kind of like you lost one of your most important players and you want to scream because it feels like everyone else in the world who doesn't watch women's cricket or doesn't know Pakistan women's cricket doesn't realize. Like my friends who I was with on holiday, they don't watch cricket, and I was like, one of them comes from the washroom and I was like, this player just retired, and I'm like telling her, and she's like, oh no, that's so sad. And I'm like, no, 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 you have to understand, it's not sad, it's like catastrophic. It's like the worst possible thing that could have happened to the team. Well, maybe not, but one of the worst possible things that could have happened has happened. And you can't hold it against her as well. She gave so much of her life to Pakistan cricket. Like you said, 15 years old. I mean, she's early 30s now. That's a ridiculous amount of time. She had a baby and came back, which people it's really hard to do, and that's why women don't do it. You can't even hold that against them because it's just really hard to do. And she took back captaincy again, didn't have to do it, did it because the team needed it. And even when she gave up captaincy, that was an act of selflessness as well, because she's like, I want to train a younger captain. She didn't get to do that, but the fact that she wanted to do that, the fact that she said that very openly, publicly, unprecedented. I mean, there's no one like her, no one with her mindset, no one with her selflessness, no one with her like knack for saving us from awful situations, or like die trying kind of mindset that she had. But yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and also one thing that I've noticed with the women's team is that especially these players, like even if you look at Sanami, or even if you look at Javeria Khan, or even if you look at Bisma, uh, they sort of retired on their own terms. Unlike the men's team, where a lot of players, despite being great and all of that, but they keep sticking around and losing their value.
I mean,
But
I would argue Sanamir was pushed out a little bit, but that's a bit of history. And I don't know. I think we never know what happened. But yeah, I do like that वो लंबी नहीं करते.
yes,
They recognize and they're like, okay, my time is done.
like
And it's
even if they get even if they get a memo, so like they are like, yeah, okay, so like we feel like our time's up now, so it's
yeah.
better to leave with your head held high rather than on a very sorry note.
And it's incredible with so much adversity and so little opportunity and so many things that are just working against you your entire
Yeah,
life, your entire career.
right.
You still manage to do that,
Yes,
you
and
know? Like,
especially coming back to the game after having a kid and
oh,
still performing really well, like that's a massive achievement.
yeah.
And then kudos to PCB for that as well. Wasim Khan for that, introducing the maternity leave and all of
It's
that. So
incredible. It's incredible.
yeah,
I was working on my women's career project at the time when these developments were happening. At that time they also increased, I think if I remember correctly, the daily allowance. It was a ridiculously low amount. They increased it to a respectable amount. I wonder if it's been increased since then. The dollar's gone up, but I highly doubt it. Um, they made sure that they were actually getting decent flights for, especially for longer kind of travels. And then there was a few different things as well about the kind of equipment that they used in their practices and stuff. And I was so happy because I was like, oh my gosh, like this is like the new dawn of women's cricket. Like they're never gonna struggle again. Little did I know. But yeah, it was an incredible policy, and I'm really glad that it's still stuck. I'm assuming it still is. And the fact that her form was so good, I think she was like our best domestic performer for consecutive tournaments after giving birth, which is insane. It's not something that, it just happens. You have to work really, really hard and have a killer mindset, and also balance being captain, balance your kid, balance your life, balance your career, balance your fitness, everything. Um, one of her first acts after coming back and playing the World Cup in 2022 was to score 50 versus Australia. Like, who does that? I mean, I wouldn't have blamed her if she, tanked the entire tournament. Uh, but yeah, she didn't, because that's what Bisma did. Even at her worst, even right now, when she was supposedly at her worst in the West Indies series, she was like our highest run scorer or something for the ODIs. And it's like, you know, yeah, at the end of her career. And literally when she was like, yeah, I'm done, I don't think I can play anymore, she was able to pull that out of nowhere, which is, it's just
Yeah.
incredible. And it makes you miss her even more. It's like, you can always take for granted that Bismah is going to score them runs. But now apparently she's not. So yeah.
So now we get to the last bit of it. I guess the England series, and what should we expect from the England series, and what are your predictions for it, and what would be like a fair result or a good result for Pakistan? Like, of course, considering like the conditions and how strong the England side is.
Yeah, I've been doing venue-based analysis for England. Unfortunately, the grounds they play on have very little women's cricket. The ones that we're going to be playing on, just some of them. The ones that do, bar scores are pretty high, but that also shows they're good for batting. But I mean, look, we went into the New Zealand series having no expectations. I thought that we would get rolled over, to be honest. I thought that I wanted to win a T20 and give them a good fight in the ODIs. That's what my plan was. We ended up winning the T20 series. We ended up giving them a right scare in the ODIs. I think
We
the
might
second
have
one.
even won this series as well.
Yeah, because of that umpire. But
Yes.
whatever, first they don't give us streaming and then they take away our wins, whatever. So I am cautiously optimistic about England. I know we're coming from a really terrible, terrible series, where we kind of disappointed and went way below expectations. But listen, we did that last year versus Bangladesh at the Asian Games, and the girls didn't let it affect them. They haven't had as big of a gap to kind of recover this time, but I believe in them. Honestly, like we just discussed, I've never ever seen people have such strong metal, so strong like psyche. No one holds their head up high. Does that make sense? No one holds their head as high as women's cricketers do, in my opinion. I don't know where it comes from. I think it just comes from like living a really difficult, life where you're like a woman in Pakistan, but also a sports person. Um, I think the conditions will suit Fatima. I think it'll suit Alia's style of batting. Sidra's in great form already. So I want to believe that everything that went wrong in the West Indies series is going to be rectified versus England. But we're up against like a Goliath of a team. Um, I don't know. I want to believe it'll be 2-1 for the ODIs. And oh, 2-1 to England. So we'll win one, England will win the
Yeah.
other. And then I want to believe that we could win the T20 series, but it's England. So
Yeah.
I'd say we'll win one in the ODIs and one in the T20s, but I want us to give them a right scare in all of them. I want
Yes.
us to like not roll over. I will excuse it if we roll over in one ODI because listen, the skill level, the gap is a little bit big. Um, but yeah, I really hope everyone has a good series. I hope that there's something to smile about at the end of it, or a few things. I mean, the West Indies series still gave us things to smile about. I think Tuba was really great, Sitra was really great, like I said. So if we can get two things from a really bad series, I will accept like four good things from the England series.
Yeah.
I can't believe I'm giving such weird metrics to measure our performance by, but such is life when you're going to play on
Yeah.
team.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I get it, and obviously, like it's going to be more about a good exposure for the side that we are getting to tour England. Probably this is our first tour since
Very nice.
2017. Probably that was the last time we played in England.
Yeah.
So a great experience and exposure for the players.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
we,
the last time
yeah,
we played England was last year at the World Cup, and they
yes,
made 200, and we didn't even get close. So if anyone wants like a reference point of what Pakistan versus England matches look like, typically that's,
yeah,
and even an ODI World Cup wala match, not pretty. So
yeah.
yeah.
Like
But
if they're competitive enough in the series,
yeah, that's a
that
win.
will be great. That's a
100%,
win.
100%. I
Yes.
agree. Plus, I hope we get to see Wahida Akhtar bowl. I think she's been with the team for a long time, been a really good domestic level bowler. It's kind of unfortunate that she doesn't get to bowl more often. I thought, again, she was a player that should have bowled in this series, especially when they were like rotating the pacers because they were like, we don't want to overburden Diana or Fatma. Well, if you don't want to overburden Diana or Fatma, when you go versus England, you're going to have to go with two paces at least. And if you don't want to overburden Diana or Fatma, Wahida's going to play. So you're telling me you're going to throw in Wahida versus England instead of giving that poor
Yes.
girl some matches beforehand. But chalo, anyways, I
Like,
hope everything does well.
like it's even early summer, so like you can even go with three paces as well.
Exactly. Exactly. I wanted them to take Hamna Bilal. She's
Yes.
been doing really well at domestic level. The other ones are a bit raw. Hamna, to be honest, is a bit raw as well.
Yes.
But they're never gonna get international exposure
The-
if you give them
Yes.
national exposure, you know? So
Absolutely. So yes. So I think we have covered pretty much all of it. So thank you very much, Iman, once again for doing this. It was a very nice talk. It was very nice talking to you, and hopefully we can have you again on the show sometime. So discuss much more about women's cricket and the sports in general. So thank you for being on the show.
yeah, no problem. And thank you for having me and thank you for letting me talk so much. I can't believe we spoke so much, but I'm really glad. It was a lot of fun. And I hope that the people who are watching learned something and hopefully they can join us in raising their voices and all of that so that women's cricket standards improve. And yeah, our girls deserve every fan they can get, every bit of awareness they can get. So thank you so much for giving me the chance to speak about this. And it
Thank
was really nice
you.
speaking.
Thank you, Iman. And this was for all of this episode. Hopefully आप लोगों को पसंद आई होगी. लाइक करें, शेयर करें, सब्सक्राइब करें, कमेंट सेक्शन में हमें कमेंट्स लिख के भेजें कि आपको वुमेन्स क्रिकेट के बारे में कोई सवालात हैं, कोई आपकी सजेशंस हैं तो वो भेजें. Any questions that you might have for Iman so that we can bring her back on the show. And this was it for this episode. Hopefully आपको पसंद आई होगी. अगले एपिसोड तक के लिए इजाजत. अल्लाह हाफ़िज़.